Arsenal's victory at Goodison Park has everybody feverishly looking up the rules of the game to make sure that Everton were actually playing football. This is the ArsenalVision Post-Match Podcast. My name is Elliot Smith, the Black Man, Twitter, Yankee Gunner. Yeah, I know. Look, Arsenal were time wasting. I think that's clear. We were time wasting at 0-0 at Goodison Park against a worthless Everton side. I mean, look, it doesn't make any logical sense, but just go with it because, Sky wants that narrative out there. And who are we to argue with Sky? To be fair, Everton were doing quite a lot of time wasting themselves. This is actually the 5th time this season they have wasted the time of their fans. So, that is something that should probably be taken into consideration. More good news. We do not have to do an inquiry into the offside rule because we won 1-0. I like these pods where we can reference a questionable or potentially scandalous refereeing decision, but don't have to be absorbed with it, like against United with the penalty being overturned, and again against Everton with Martinelli's goal being disallowed, and what a goal it was. Shame that it had to go away, but it did. If you want a little schadenfreude, our instant reaction pod with Clive and Paul turned into a bit of a laugh at Chelsea, but more so Manchester United. I recommend you go out and find some of the videos about them out there. There are some good ones. You can see Marcus Rashford walking his absolute socks off. You can see the Butcher being, I guess, occupied by the spirit of Mustafi. There's all kinds of good stuff there. There's Andre Onana just not having long enough arms, I guess. So, there's just lots of good stuff out there about Manchester United. And I suggest that you absorb it because whenever football gives you something good, be sure to take it because you just don't know how much longer you're going to have it. What we have that is good, though, is a win to discuss. And we just love you for being here to discuss it with us. I do want to give a programming note. We are not going to do a rewatch of the Everton game, in part because we love you and we wouldn't do that to you, but in part because what we're going to do tomorrow is something special. Over on the Patreon side, we're going to do a welcome back to the Champions League episode, talking about the importance of the competition of the club, what it's meant over the years, some of the high points, some of the low points, what it means for it to be back, because it is a big thing and we should celebrate it as a big thing. It's where we belong. It's where we were for 2 decades consecutively, and we are back this Wednesday. But unfortunately, we have to discuss 1-0 to the Arsenal first. So here to do that with me now is Tim. You can find him on Twitter at Stillmaner. Hello, Tim.
Hello there.
And Clive. You can find him on Twitter at ClivePSC. Hello, Clive.
Hello.
Okay, so I think it depends how you want to position things in the show, because arguably one of the biggest things to talk about, because the game itself was maybe a little flat, I think it's fair to say, but we'll take flat 1-0s 38 times a season. Thank you very much. But the goalkeeper thing is big, and the lineup thing was big. So let's put that at the top, because I think we could get into how the changes influence the game, but I don't see how there's anything more important than that. So, Clive, I'm going to ask you a question to set up the conversation. Obviously, Vieira comes in for Kai. Raya comes in for Ramsdale. Those are 2 very big, notable changes. Jesus doesn't come in for Eddie. Do you think this is the team Mikel wanted to put out against Everton, purely? Or do you think that Champions League on Wednesday factors into this? Because for me, the 2 most important games this week were Everton and Spurs. Right? Those are the games that I want to win the absolute most. And so I would be playing the strongest team in those 2 games, but I can understand our first time back in the Champions League in 6 years. You want to impress. Do you think that the changes had an eye towards the Champions League?
I think it's a 3-game week, and there'll be 3 games that they'll be thinking about. So I actually think the most important game of the week for the club is probably the game on Wednesday. Because it's the first time we've been there for 7 years. We played Spurs just the other week. Right? So for the club, I think Wednesday's the one. And for the players as well, it's a competition that none of them have played in for Arsenal, really. So I think there's a level of importance there, but they're all important. So, excuse me. I try not to think about it that way, Elliot. I'm trying not to impose my thinking on it, like you have just done. Like for you, the league games are important. Why would you impose that on everybody in September? Just to see, I think it's important we accumulate points during this period of the season. It's very important we do that. And then basically, we can just focus on the competitions as we go through them. The worst thing that happened at the weekend was losing Martinelli. I just want to keep our depth. That's the most important thing. I'm not concerned about this as much as I would have been a year ago, because we're finding players all the time, and players are looking around and thinking, I better shake a leg here. If I don't, I'll be in a tracksuit for a while. And that's what competition brings, and I think that's what we're trying to do. I had one of my mini rants tonight about standards in the club, and what do you think Arteta wants to do? Does he want to win the Carabao Cup, or does he want to win the Champions League? He wants to win the Champions League, and these actions and movements are telling you, I'm trying to lift the standards here. You come with me. And every game is very important. You don't raise standards by picking and choosing when you turn up, picking and choosing what you care about. You care about every single thing that you do for the time you're in the club. So, and I see that by the actions that they're undertaking. And the goalkeeper one is the biggest signpost of all, which I'm sure we'll get into detail later on. But yeah, mate, just a selection and get used to it. We're going to see more changes on Wednesday and more changes on Sunday again.
Yeah. It's interesting because I do think also there's a point where you have to pick a moment to see what someone has in their locker, right? You have to pick a moment to see David Raya starting for Arsenal or to see Fabio Vieira getting his chance to start again. And until you pick those moments, it's all theoretical. What I will say is I can think back to a time when I'd look at our bench, Tim, and I didn't know a couple of the names on the bench, literally hadn't heard of them, or, they were academy kids that I've only seen on some grainy footage, reposted on Twitter from someone using their phone to film it. I can think back to times when if any of our sort of established first 11 players weren't available, we couldn't cope with it. And you could argue that 2 seasons ago, our season collapsed because of that. And even last season, to some extent, it was impacted by that. What I think is notable is no Party, right? He's out injured. No Urian Timber, unfortunately for the season. You look at the team yesterday and 1 through 11 plus every single player on the bench, I'd be fine with any of them playing. Here's some of the people that were on the bench yesterday. Gabriel Jesus, Tomiyasu, Leandro Trossard, Kai Havertz, Aaron Ramsdale, Emil Smith-Rowe, Jakob Kivior, Jorginho, and Reece Nelson. Don't know why Tomiyasu was the only one I only said his first name. So I'll go back and say Takahiro Tomiyasu. So they all get the formality. Every single one of those players is someone that if they came on, I'd be fine with them playing. And as it turns out, we lose Martinelli to injury and Trossard comes on and he wins the game. And I think it is really where you need to be if you want to win the title. And so while we focus on lineups so much and we do get pretty animated, I mean, all right, let me put this the right way. Other people focus on them so much while I live in sort of a Zen-like bubble where it is all equanimity and calm. But others get so animated by lineups that they that we kind of lose sight of the fact that we have really built a squad, and even with the absences, I mean, you start to think if Timber and Party were fit, who wouldn't you be making match day squad? So, Tim, is it the case that, instead of being too concentrated on which players get picked, what you see now is a group that extends well beyond the 11 that can all not just start, but influence and win games, as was the case against Everton?
Yeah, absolutely. And this is an adjustment for all of us. And personally, I'm quite brutal mentally. And when it comes to football, anyway, I move on quickly, I latch onto things quickly, and I go with them. And sometimes that's to my detriment. Sometimes I write players out of the club mentally, and I just move on from them before they're even gone. But this is a concept for me. I'm there. I don't really care that much about the starting lineup. We've been talking about this for ages, and it's just an adjustment. Do you think Man City fans argued last season about who started between Riyad Mahrez and Bernardo Silva? I doubt it was a topic of conversation whatsoever. Do you think they argued about who started between Akanji and Kyle Walker? Probably not. Probably didn't care. Probably didn't even notice until 10 minutes into the game. And that's a stage we've got to get to. And in some respects, I listened to the instant reaction on my way home last night, and you made that point, Elliot, and you made it really well. And I thought, do you know what? I barely even know, not just didn't notice it in the performance, but I didn't think about that, about all the players that didn't play. And one of the things that would be really interesting to do actually is look at the list of unused subs from every game this season, because that really tells you about your depth. And it's also why I had no appetite for the kind of Trossard must play. Why isn't he playing? And it's just you can only have 11 players on the pitch at a time, and they'll all get their chance. Well, Most of them will get their chance. most of
Obviously, Emil Smith-Rowe won't get his chance, but everybody else will get their chance.
Clearly, like there's a Carabao Cup game next week. Like a lot of those guys will get to blow some cobwebs off in that, I think. But like Leandro Trossard, like he got on, he got his chance, he won us the game. It's no big deal. Like we don't have to. Like I just think in general. Sorry, this is a general point I'm going to make as well. Just because of as well some of the people that were around me yesterday, there's still just a little bit of an air of desperation and hysteria, I think, and it's understandable. It's not like bad hysteria, but it's like yesterday around like the tension on like 55 minutes was just like, oh my God, why haven't we scored yet? Why aren't we lumping corners at like, I just think everyone needs to calm down a bit. And I think we will. We'll get used to this, I think. And there's just still that little air of desperation, I think. And it bleeds into conversations like this. Like, why isn't he playing? And it's like, we can only get 16 players on the pitch in a game. As you say, we've probably got 18, 19 at the moment who could all play a part in a game. And they can't all do it in every game. But they will all get their chance. They will all have a role to play at some point. It's a long season. And I, we can go on to this, but I also think pretty much all of the decisions were tactical about the game plan for this game, like not going long, not lumping the ball into Everton's like defense of 7'8" super mutants. All of the team selection was geared towards that, not having Havertz, not having Ramsdale, and all of that, and that's really positive as well. So it's not just rotation; it's for this game, this player works. It might not work for the next game. Might be a different game plan, but that's the level of rotation. That's what Manchester City do. That's how Pep made his decision between Bernardo Silva and Mahrez and Kyle Walker and Akanji. It's like, do they have a really fast winger? We'll play Kyle Walker. Do we want to dominate possession a bit more? We'll play Akanji. Those are the kind of decisions. That's the stage we're at now.
Yeah, and realistically, we should be on 15 points. I mean, we really should be. If it wasn't for very sloppy, lazy defending against 10-man Fulham against one corner kick, we're on 15 points. I think the reason for some of the anxiety over selection and some of the extra focus on it is, despite being on 13 points, what should be 15, I don't feel we've clicked, and I don't think anybody could argue we've clicked. And I think as a result of that, it's this weird situation where we're dominating games, but there's still a sense that there's got to be more to come from this team. And so there's always the feeling, I think, because fans aren't at training and because we don't necessarily know the tactical plan in depth, what the manager's communicating to the players, there's always, I think, that sense of if you just pick the right 11, it'll click. That's actually how things click. You just pick the 11 players I think are the right 11, then we'll click. And that's probably not how it works. Clive, the big news, though, obviously, is Raya starting and Ramsdale not. And first of all, I have to laugh. I have to laugh at the social media admin over at Arsenal because a couple of things. First of all, the day before the game, like right on midnight or whatever, they have their auto post that goes out and it says match day. And who do you think is the pictured player in the match day post? It's Aaron Ramsdale. Of course it is. Of course it is. And I even went in the Discord and I said, it'd be absolutely hilarious if they start Raya after posting this. Sure enough, they do. Then, after they post the lineup with Raya starting, what do they post? Goalkeepers union, heart emoji, and Ramsdale and Raya hugging. You're not fooling anyone, mate. Ramsdale's not happy to be on the bench. Raya's not happy to be on the bench. Players want to play. They may love each other. Maybe I'll be healthy competition, but this is going to be one of those things you manage. Those players want to play. And by the way, I'm not saying there's a problem. I just thought it was funny. I want to read some comments from Mikel, though, Clive. I mean, Mikel just is a really, really unique and different kind of dude, as we saw during All or Nothing. And these comments after the match, I mean, this just tells you he is in a very different place than most of us when he thinks about football. I am a really young manager. I've only been 3.5 years in the job, and I have a few regrets for what I've done. Okay, here it comes. It's going to be something big, something we've talked about on the pod, I'm sure. One of them, it was that in 2 occasions I felt after 60 minutes and after 85 minutes in 2 games in this period, I wanted to change the keeper in that moment, and I didn't do it. Nope, that wasn't what I was expecting. I didn't have the courage to do it, but I'm able to take a winger or a striker and put a central defender on and go back to go to a back 5 to hold that result. And we draw those games, and I was so unhappy, and someone is going to do it. And maybe it's, that's strange. Why? Why not? Tell me why not. You have all the qualities in another goalkeeper to do something. Something has happened. You want to change momentum. Do it. It's a regret that I had. And now my feeling is to get everybody engaged in the team, that they have to play regardless of competition and do it. And it's my message. His big regret as a manager is not subbing one goalkeeper for another. You got to love Mikel Arteta. And he says in this period, when we draw those games, you do look at the Fulham game, for example, where maybe we started to go long a bit when we could have controlled the game. Did he want to bring Raya on for his passing? Is that a game he's referencing? We'll never know. But Clive, there's an interesting thought here, right? If you know Everton are going to play no football and pose no threat, then the thing you need your keeper to be most is a sweeper and a passer. And so we brought on the keeper for this game that probably has an edge in that department. Is that how you see it? How do you see the decision? And what do you think about the stylistic difference we saw in the guy who came in for Ramsdale, our brand new, I won't say number one, just goalkeeper?
Yeah, so I had a gut feel for Raya starting. Purely as you get close to the game, you start thinking about last year's game because that's your reference point. And one thing I do sort of know about Raya and reading the data as well as reading or doing all the YouTube stuff is that he's very good at coming for crosses. And I thought, you know what, this might be a day for Raya coming for crosses. I did see, Lewis said something about Everton have the most, or in the top 3 for pressing or something like that, or high turnovers or something like that. And I thought, you know what, this makes sense to have Raya play. Just got a feeling for it. And then he started. And so I'm okay with this goalkeeper thing anyway. I'm okay with having competition. I'm okay with raising standards. I can't say, and we shouldn't say as fans, when we lose our pieces, when we drop 2 points at home to Fulham, we shouldn't turn around and say we should miss opportunities to improve our squad and put people under pressure because we have got thoughts in our mind. All of us listening, we expect to win something big in the next 2 years. Let's just be honest about it. And how's that going to happen? It's going to happen by making tough decisions, by bringing better quality people in to drive really good quality people to a level we need to get to, because the teams that we're playing against are pretty good as well. And so I was absolutely fine with this. And Raya surprised me how calm I felt watching him, but he wasn't a game where Everton put any pressure on us at all. They stood off a little bit, but he still looked quality. My worry about this whole goalkeeper thing, Elliot, is I'm fine with it, but most of the pundits that are judging Arsenal either didn't play played in the era when there was a back pass rule, or played in an era when you couldn't, people could play out from the back, no one allowed in the box, etc. You get your first 2 passes for free. And so the whole concept around goalkeeping has changed. Yet the people that are reporting on it have not changed. They are still in an old school mentality. When your goalkeeper's having 40 touches and your centre forward's having 10, the game's changed. Your ability to control the ball is completely changed. The physical and mental focus that's required now to be a goalkeeper is far more rounded than the old days when blokes that were round like me stood between the sticks. Do you see what I mean? It's a different concept now. It's different. You've got the big bloke to stand there. People like Fraser Forster, I think he might be at Spurs still. Big guy, can't do anything with his feet. Peter Cech came along in an era. He came along now, he would struggle significantly. The game has changed. The position is changed. We have to be open to that change in the game. I can only say to you, the stress. I've managed teams where the opposing goalkeeper has got fantastic feet. The stress it causes you, knowing that every one of their players is in play when it's at his feet, is a problem. It's a problem. It changes your behaviours. It really does. It changes who you are. So I'm massively open to the evolution of this position, the evolution how we look at it. I don't think Arteta will be changing goalkeepers during games, but the greater point he made was about keeping players engaged. And I think that's key. We're elevating our competitive level. We need better players. So to keep better players happy, you need to make them feel engaged with your actions and how you behave. Otherwise, you lose half your squad, or you can't lose half your squad when us as fans are expecting big things to happen. It won't work with the 14 players. We know what that looks like, doesn't it? We know what that looks like. So he needs to incorporate management styles to incorporate another 5 or 6 and make them feel engaged. And that's what he's trying to do. And I'm going to sit back and watch it.
I'll make you a friendly wager, Clive. You want to make a friendly wager?
Go on,
I bet you he does sub a keeper at some point this season.
He may do.
He said it.
I don't think it'll be. I don't think it'll be in. Well, he may do, and so what? Seriously, so what? Yeah, we've got to shake it up, man.
I mean, it is a player. It is a player, and they are players with different qualities. So we'll get into the meat of the performance. But Tim, I think this is probably one of the more important and interesting things to come from this game. So it'd be silly to just hand wave it. I mean, it is a major thing that he started David Raya over Aaron Ramsdale in a Premier League game. I mean, he will talk it down. He will talk about just using the squad. It's a normal thing. And while I sort of agree, this is something you just don't see, really. That doesn't mean it's wrong, by the way. I think it does make sense. We have 2 excellent keepers. Why have 2 excellent keepers, not use them? But you don't see it at City, and you don't see it at Liverpool, right? You don't see it at a lot of the major clubs. I guess Barcelona, Madrid have had a bit of a history of doing it recently. So, Tim, let's just touch on the major difference. I think David Raya, and I'm speaking for myself now, but I'm going to speak my truth. I felt more comfortable with him in this type of game in terms of how he managed the game with the ball at his feet. I've felt for a while now that in tense games, Ramsdale has a bit of a habit of maybe slightly abandoning the plan a little too early. I think it goes all the way back to away at Newcastle 2 seasons ago when the ball went long and it just kept coming back at us. And at that time we said, well, he doesn't have the technical midfielders to play to, but he definitely has them now. And you saw Raya was willing to slide in little slip passes into Zinchenko, right? Between the lines. He was willing to play long. He played one really cool whipped low ball up the line to White. He played a long ball to Saka that Saka almost took down for counter. He was 32 of 34, passing 7 of 9 on long balls. And he played higher up the pitch off the ball. I think teams have tried to hit us with the long ball more. And Raya has been willing to be pushed way, way up. Contrast that with Onana over at United, who is like channeling David Ospina playing on his line and letting everything in. So I felt really comfortable with Raya in a game like this. And to Clive's point, very good on crosses. We have not been good defensively on set pieces, unfortunately. And so while I do think to some extent it is just rotation, I think you saw in this game some of the factors for why Mikel may have made the change. What was your impression of him back there? Because he had very little to do from a shot-stopping standpoint, and thankful for that.
Yeah, and part of the reason he had very little to do from a shot-stopping standpoint, as you say, like one of the kind of mischaracterizations of Sean Dyche teams, they do press. Like you look at his Burnley team, they were up there in terms of the amount of pressure. I mean, we conceded a goal at Turf Moor during lockdown where, where Granit Xhaka whacked the ball in off someone. And so part of the reason we didn't concede any shots because we didn't really give the ball away there and didn't let them in that way. And of course, because he was good off his line, the few set pieces they had weren't really a problem. I think there's 2 facets to this. One of them is that this was clearly like everything about the game plan is telling you that it was about don't go long, don't go smashing the ball into their centre halves. It's pointless. Like, well, not all the corners, but the majority of the corners were short, and we score from a short corner. Even the centre. And this goes down to like the actual game plan as well. I don't think Ramsdale's going rogue when from centre, the ball goes back to him and he whacks it upfield. Like that's clearly what he's asked to do. This was the first time I can remember in ages where the ball went back to the goalkeeper from centre and he played it short. So, and then, playing Vieira instead of Havertz, like everything about this game, even maybe playing Nketiah instead of Jesus, because Jesus is better at that kind of competing for aerial balls. Like everything about this game plan is telling you it was about keep the ball on the floor, do not go smashing it. There's no point. Look at the size of their team, the size of their centre halves. There is no point in just whacking it into that viper's nest. And so clearly the selection of David Raya was about that. So at face value, maybe on Wednesday against PSV, maybe we want more long passes. And so, I do think there's an element of you can pick the goalkeeper to tailor to the game plan. It's what the women's team do. albeit with the women's team, they have two very, very different goalkeepers, like opposites of one another, and they pick them according to the game plan. So they have one who's very quick off her line, big long throw, great long kick, and they have one who's much more about, short control distribution and all of that. And it just depends on what the opponent's going to do. The danger for Ramsdale, I think, is clearly in this game, Raya was selected because he's considered better in short possession and he's got more composure there. And you definitely saw that at 1-0 in particular. The first thing we did after we went 1-0 up was we went back and we knocked it around the back and we kept it away from Everton. Don't give away any stupid free kicks. Don't go up for headers with them and all of that and create like collision situations. Go 1-0 up and then play keep away, basically, and pass it around. And clearly Arteta thought that Raya was a better goalkeeper for that. I think that's what he's talking about when he talks about subbing a goalkeeper on. I really, really, really suspect one of those games was the Fulham home game. I really think that. I really think, because he said something about conceding a late equaliser, I wouldn't be surprised at all if as soon as we went 2-1 up against Fulham, he thought, I'd love to get Raya on because I want to knock the ball around and keep it off them. We didn't. What did we do? We concede a corner against Fulham. They go and equalise because we didn't keep control of the ball. So I think there's that to it. And that's a danger for Ramsdale because clearly Arteta thinks that he's better. But the bigger danger for Ramsdale, I associate Raya with long distribution. I associate him with smashing the ball up to Tony and Mbuemo. So for me, it's early days. It's very early days. But for me, it looks like Raya's potentially got both sides of the coin. And we could be seeing in the medium to long term a bit of a change of the guard here.
Yeah, the problem with stating your opinion on this stuff is it can sound like agenda. And, I certainly don't want to sound like that because I have said from the start of the season, I think Ramsdale would win the job and keep the job. And I think he's good enough. I didn't see him as a position we needed to improve on. But to be fair, you're not going to win every game 3-0 or 2-0 or 3-1. Sometimes you have to win 1-goal games. And I do feel in tight games late, we see Ramsdale start to go long. And set pieces have been an issue, as I said. And those are two things that we we may be improving on here. I think it is relevant, by the way, that after we went 1-0 up at Everton, David Raya had 16 passes, 12 of which went short. He did keep it on the ground and he did keep us in possession. I think that was really important. So
can I just add on that as well? Sorry, just one more kind of sentence on this. We saw a lot of games last season where Ramsdale really pulled off some great saves. Like I'm thinking of Leeds last season where we were lucky to win 1-0 and Ramsdale was our best player and he made loads of saves. But maybe in there, and again, I'm kind of clutching at straws here. Like I say, it's early days, but maybe there's a point in there that we don't want our goalkeeper in the last 10 minutes of away games when we're 1-0 up, having to like at Liverpool at Anfield, for example, last year. Like maybe we don't want situations where our goalkeeper's having to flail around the box. And, I don't want to discredit Ramsdale for that because he made massive saves that won us and kept us in those games. But this to me feels a bit more like prevention. Like we don't want you to have to do that because we want to keep the ball away from the opposition.
Yeah, and ultimately, here's the good news. I think we could win a league title with Aaron Ramsdale at keeper. I mean, we were 3/4 of the way there with him, and I don't think he's what cost us down the stretch. I think we've covered that. Could probably win one with Raya. I don't know. We've seen him once in a game where he wasn't tested as a keeper, and that may be instructive, right? That he's the better ball playing goalkeeper, that he's more of a footballer, and in games where we're going to play all the football, maybe that's what you want back there. It'll be interesting to see how he uses him. As a final point on this, Clive, and by the way, the reason to go so long on this, it is by far the biggest and most interesting thing I think that happened on this day, from a football standpoint anyway. Clive, do you think it is set up now, and what Mikel has set himself up for is a cadence of Raya on the weekends and Ramsdale midweek? Do you think once Ramsdale starts the Champions League tie, which I suspect he will, I think Mikel gives himself a bit of a problem he doesn't need to give himself if he doesn't give Ramsdale the Champions League tie. I could be wrong there. First of all, do you agree with my presumption he'll start then? And do you think we'll see that cadence of Ramsdale midweek and Raya the weekend? because the Derby's
I'm,
next
I'm,
weekend.
I'm not sure we're going to see any sort of cadence. I think he's dismissing the previous cadences that we are known, the cup keepers, the league keepers, etc. I think he's removing that cadence from our mindset, and he's trying to open our minds into the art of the possibility around rotation for all the players, not just the goalkeeper. But of course, we think goalkeepers are different species and different people, and they've got to be made to feel comfortable. They've got to know their defenders. Well, I watched a game yesterday with our centre backs running backwards, and they looked pretty comfortable to me. They were heading it back to him, and there was no misunderstandings ongoing there. You get your respect for your teammates in training, and you need to build that respect up. The players know he's good. They know Aaron Ramsdale's good. End of story, right? And they've got the trust of the group, so that understanding will come. They've both got their strengths. We've got a bigger data slice with Ramsdale, so we've seen a few mistakes. As soon as Raya chucks one in, we'll be after him. And we got to embrace the debate around the players. So if I'm gonna sit here and say they're just players, then we have to embrace the debate that they're just players. And they will have a day when they feel good, and they have a day when the opponent suits them. And I'm hoping he'll know that and he'll pick the right guy. Right. And just like I would do if it was Ben White or Saliba, etc., etc. Saliba's carrying injury and someone else is looking good. Don't play the guy that's under par. Play the guy that's looking good. This is what we want, isn't it? It's what we want. We just have to embrace the debate and don't rush to conclusion. But you can't, I watched that game like everybody else did, and Raya looked really, really good. Really, really good. I watched the England game when Aaron Ramsdale, England-Scotland last week. Ramsdale looked really, really good for England. Really good. He transformed how England played. Transformed it. So he's thinking, I'm on the top of my game and I didn't play at the weekend. Manager's got to manage this. They're men. He's got to manage them accordingly. Most important thing is that we've gone to Liverpool for the first time in I don't know how long and come back with 3 points. We didn't get Liverpool or Manchester last year with 3 points. And if we change that story, we could be having a different May. And this keeper was part of that story. Maybe he suits that environment. He takes the heat out of the environment away from home. Because I thought he put the crowd to sleep, how comfortable we were by creating those overloads in the base of our team. I thought he put the crowd to sleep perfectly, and that's why we ran out comfortable winners.
Yeah, I noticed also just some of the positions he takes up. He's very confident if he has to slide over to the left wing, left half space to be available for a pass. You know what I mean? He doesn't mind sort of vacating his goal mouth. He doesn't mind coming out a little bit and being that sweeper. And yeah, I just think given that the one way we get hurt is being hit long, having that extra body that can sweep and prevent the long ball from opening you up, it takes a lot of bravery to step all the way out there. But I think that works, and when you have guys like Beto and DCL who, can win the battle for the first ball, it doesn't hurt if your keeper's right there to clean up the second ball. It didn't really happen that way because Everton played so little football, as it turns out. Tim, the interesting thing is, as a result of the goalkeeper change, we haven't really talked about Kai Havertz not starting. I think this one is a nothing burger. I think Kai has been fine, but he certainly hasn't been good enough to feel that he's a nailed-on name written in ink on the team sheet. And as a result, Fabio Vieira, who's been quite good, came on and he played. And my assessment of it is Fabio Vieira did fine also. Now, I think Fabio Vieira's performance is probably being built up a little bit by the fact that where he's come from, traveling in his Arsenal reputation, right, from the depths of the Southampton game last season to now really being built up, people are behind him. The wind is at his back, so to speak. And Havertz doesn't really have that coming from Chelsea. Big money, hasn't really broken through. Maybe the wind is facing him a bit more. And so that's a reflection of the two different reactions to the performances. Overall, I thought Vieira was fine, but he was involved in one of the critical moments of the game, and we can just jump to it because why not? Mostly sterile domination from Arsenal, 78% possession in the first half, but the critical moment comes from a square ball deflected forward to Vieira. He plays a lovely pass to Martinelli, but he's still got a lot to do. And Martinelli, who was absolutely rinsing Ashley Young, and I do think losing him was a huge factor in this game. He finishes Thierry Henry style, right? Slightly opens his body and just passes it into the far side netting. Beautiful finish, does his hamstring, probably one of those 21-day things. We haven't seen an update on it yet as far as I'm aware, but I imagine we'll be without him for a few weeks. Did show back up on the bench, so maybe that's a good sign that it's not more serious. Let's get into all of the pieces of it. First, let's set aside the refereeing part of it. It was a really nice little moment from Vieira to his mate Martinelli in a lovely goal. And I think, again, when we play quick, when we play first time, when we use our pace and directness, it varies things up a little bit. We were doing a lot of sort of probing, and this was one of those really quick, incisive moments. A lovely move. We didn't get to keep it.
Yeah, absolutely. I thought Vieira was very good. Thought he was 7 out of 10, and I think all the points you make are completely correct. Like a 7 out of 10 for someone who's on an upward trajectory gets talked about like an 8 or a 9 out of 10, whereas your £65 million new signing that people maybe didn't really like or trust from the off, that's a very different thing. I really like this game from Vieira because I kind of feel like a 7 out of 10 away from home when you're starting was what I needed to see from him, because like we brought him on for good cameos in games where we needed a goal and he helped us to do that. And it's like, great, that game state, that's fine. But clearly, like, to be a really important player, you need other game states as well. And, playing against Everton, all right, we were still effectively chasing a goal, but, playing from the start and playing well, that showed it's not just about that game state. So I thought that was really good. But again, it's clearly, I don't think that this was like a slight on Havertz. This was just, we didn't want to fight fire with fire. We wanted to fight fire with water. That's the way I'd put it. It was just like everything about the team selection was about control, keeping the ball on the floor, keeping the ball. And yeah, I thought Vieira played really well. And like you say, perhaps that's is kind of unfortunate that he didn't get that moment. And that moment, as well as you said on the instant reaction, it was very similar to Leicester last season. In fact, like this game was very similar to Leicester away last season. And it did kind of, it's difficult to pass how much it was the goal being disallowed and how much it was just going from Martinelli to Trossard. And, look, ultimately Trossard wins us the game, so it's fine. But at the time, I did wonder whether Reece Nelson should have come on, just because he is like a proper analogue to Martinelli.
Mm-hmm.
He kind of does Martinelli things. However, again, I think Clive made a good point on the instant reaction. If you've got Vieira and Trossard, there's a lot of potential for combination, and that is clearly an area Arsenal identified, because Zinchenko a couple of times tried to hit that same channel, both in the first and second half. They were clearly felt they could get around the back of the Everton right back. So I think that's something I either identified in-game or pre-game. So yeah, it was really unfortunate. I have opinion, like, from what I understand now, the reasons for disallowing the goal were sound and in accordance with the laws. I think that law is a nonsense. I don't really understand who asked for that or why. I don't understand why we're trying so hard to disallow goals. And yet, like, penalties seem to be just given so easily. And so we're really satisfied with giving like certain goals in those situations, but in every other situation seem to want to take them away. Also, I just think the speed of law changes, particularly around offside, is just like, I spend a lot of time around football. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's one of my biggest passions. It's
so rules shouldn't come as a surprise to you, right? You shouldn't.
Yeah, it's just like, it's impossible to keep up with. I didn't know about that. And look, maybe that's on me, but like, I didn't know about that, and I spend quite a lot of time around football, and it's like, I can't keep up with these constant and particularly a change like that, where it's like, who asked for this? Why? Why have you added yet another layer of subjectivity where it really wasn't needed, made things harder for yourself? But at the same time, it's like, if the fans can't keep pace with this chopping and changing and new initiatives and this and that and the other, like, if I need to read Dale Johnson's Twitter feed every day to understand the laws of the game, like, you've gone too far, and the laws are not fit for purpose if you're changing them all the time in ways that just don't seem to add anything.
Yeah, I think sometimes common sense is a good litmus test of a law, in that if you see a goal chalked off, and the rule was properly applied, the law was applied correctly, as it was in this case, but that doesn't make any sense, then the law is probably wrong. For example, the interfering with play law is a common sense law, right? So if you're standing in an offside position directly in front of the keeper, I mean, we actually saw this improperly applied just what was a couple weeks ago. But if you're standing directly in front of the keeper and a shot comes in and you hop over it and the keeper can't see it coming, you've interfered with play, right? It's common sense. But if you're standing over on the touchline and the shot comes in and you're in an offside position, you've not interfered with play, you're not offside. Like, that is common sense. This is one of those cases where, yes, the law was properly applied. I acknowledge that is an offside goal. It cannot stand. But it doesn't feel like common sense. It's a square ball. It only goes forward due to the intervention from the Everton player. So anytime you wind up in a situation like that, I think where the application of the law yields an outcome that doesn't feel like it makes sense logically, that probably needs to be looked at. Now, it doesn't get us the goal back. It doesn't get Martinelli his goal back. It doesn't get Martinelli his hamstring back. But that's another story altogether. And Clive, one of the things I think that makes Martinelli undroppable is not his imperious form where he's great every game. I think he is a player who gives us something very different on the left than what we have on the right. And I think that dynamic is important. That lightning and thunder combination, the directness, the speed of his running and his relentlessness of running versus Saka's control, possession, dribbling, ability to draw defenders and make the right pass. Martinelli is going to the byline, right? He's running. So I thought it was a little interesting that Trossard came on instead of Nelson, but maybe it was the amount of time left in the game where Mikel just trusted Trossard for more of that time. What do you think about that dynamic? Because now we're going to be without Martinelli for a bit, and Trossard plays the position quite differently. How do you think we cope with that? The loss of that sort of directness and the pace that we have on the left in Martinelli's absence?
Yeah, it depends on what the opposition offers us on the day. If an opposition is playing high up, we're thinking, we can clip over the top to a quick winger, and then we're going to miss that player. The fact that Everton were already scared out of their boots, and we brought on a player that's quite good in small spaces in Trossard, because we'd already passed them to death, and so it was. I thought it was the right substitution. We have this imprint in our mind, and myself included. If you ask me which City I prefer, do I prefer the Grealish, Bernardo Silva wide City, or do I prefer the Sane Sterling wide City? I'd say Sane Sterling, because that's the sort of players I like to see, right? But City won the treble with two wingers that just controlled the ball, right, and came inside and made combinations in Bernardo and Jack Grealish. So there are different ways to skin a cat, Elliot, and that's why I don't agree with your line that Martinelli's undroppable, because the game changes, right? The game changes, and none of these players are undroppable, apart from maybe Saka. But some people are digging him out, So, yeah, it's whatever. As soon as the game starts, but pre-game, this game, I'm thinking, you know what? I've got a fancy for Raya. You know what? I think Havertz would be quite good for this game. He's going to be quite physical, blah, blah, blah. Nah, play Vieira. Move the ball. Nothing moves quicker than the ball. I thought Tomiyasu might play. Nah, not doing that. We're going to combat the fact we haven't got a tall left back by controlling the ball and making sure we have a better keeper for crosses. That, to me, is a fantastic tactical selection, for this game. And we took the life out of them in 3 minutes. Tim was in the ground. He probably couldn't believe how we kept the ball for the first 3 minutes, and the game was completely set. Last changing room, you say in the changing room, sorry, we come out, let's impose our game on them. Both coaches say it. And what happened? We imposed our game on them, and they just had to react to us. They were completely in our spell. So I thought it was the right substitution. I think Nelson's going to have a role to play. I do. I have to wean myself off of having these, if Martinelli's not there, because it's what we do. What happens if Saliba's not there? What happens if Saka's not there? We got to find another way to control that football. And I thought the way we went about it was really, really good. Really good. And I think the players, in my mind now, I'm having to adjust what I really, really like to, can we play as a combined unit, understand each other, move the ball quickly, because they're the principles that matter to me. The goal was an absolute highlight of that. Quick movement, cohesive movement, bum, 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 here we go, in goal, in the back of net before I could move on my settee. Right, that's the sort of stuff I want to see. And you don't need to be a speedster to do that once you've got a team back. It's about small space combinations and two-footed technique. And we've got a number of those. And it's really nice, really nice.
Yeah, well said. By the way, my comment about Martinelli being undroppable is more the fact that when he's fit, it seems Mikel always picks him, right? I mean, and so I think there's a reason.
Most of us would pick him, wouldn't we? Most of us would pick him if he's fit. But we've also got to realize this. We're in a 55-game season, and that kid had one trip to Brazil. He trained on different surfaces, different environment, come back, and he's got a little tweak. It's going to happen. Our players are getting good. They're going to do internationals. Things are going to happen. We're going to have to adjust accordingly based on their workload, right?
Yeah, and to be fair, like one of the things that hasn't been discussed in the lineup conversation about Kai not starting or, Jesus not starting, for example, or even Ramsdale, though I think this is less of the issue, is just this is the first game from the international break. They did travel all over. They did play in different games in different situations on different kinds of pitches. And who knows, when they went through their return tests with the medical team, if someone didn't show up in the red zone or with a little bit of tightness or something like that. So sometimes you can think this is a major, he picked this because he wanted technical players to control. Like it all makes sense. And then you find out actually 3 of the players came back in the red zone or whatever the case may be.
You're absolutely right, Elliot. That's a really good point. And to that point, there was probably the biggest risk we probably took this game was probably Gabriel at the back, because he played two near enough full games for Brazil. His debut, big long journey, comes back. He has to play at Everton, right? He's got to head airplanes out. And he played the game. And towards the end of that game, he looked tired. Tim, you may not have seen it if you've not seen it on film, but he looked tired, mate, towards the end of that game. And I'm thinking, mate, just get off this pitch. We need you for the rest of the week. We've got 2 massive games. It wouldn't surprise me to see Gabriel come off in the PSV game if he starts, because obviously Sunday we need him there. And this is sort of things we have to get used to now. People doing extra work, extra load, 3 massive games in a week. And how can we manage the group as a whole?
Yeah. It's so interesting how Gabriel has once again just proven himself to be a critical component of this team and a player we absolutely need back there. After what we went through at the start of the season, the hand-wringing about him, I am still a believer that it was never the intention for him to go. And I by the way, I will still sit here and tell you, I do not think Gabriel didn't start those games early in the season because of transfer rumors. I think that those were decisions that were made to get Partey and Rice on the pitch together. And I'll be very, very curious when Partey is back to see if we try that system again. You know what? My guess is I bet we will. But we'll see. Sadly, we won't get to see for a while. And the one thing I think all of us said when we picked us to win the title or not win the title or whatever is if we're going to win a title this season, we just need that little bit of injury luck. And we sit here without Partey and without Timber and without Martinelli, and Jesus has missed most of the season. Thankfully, he's back, and Zinchenko missed the early parts. And we got to keep players fit, for God's sakes. It's just the one thing we need to go our way. We got to talk a little bit about the idea of sterile domination. How we're playing. Are we clicking enough in attack? Maybe the center forward position, one that we really should touch on. Eddie getting a start. Mikel's really trusted in him. And I think that there's a question about, how the dynamics are going to shift now that Jesus should be starting to come back into full fitness, or, if that is indeed the case. So we'll talk about all of that. But in order to talk about all of that, I think it's pretty clear that first we have to tell you about how to keep your privates properly groomed. It's really that simple. And I'm just going to tell you what it says here. I'm just going to read it because sometimes reading it is better than me coming up with my own thing. It says, fresh ball fall is upon us. And you need to be in the festive spirit. Light a candle, get some pumpkin spice, and make sure your area looks nice with the sponsor of today's show is Manscaped. Remember, you can go to manscaped.com, use code ArsenalVision for 20% off free shipping. Manscaped.com, promo code ArsenalVision, 20% off free shipping. By this point, you know all about Manscaped, but let's go back to the basics. The Lawnmower 4.0. This is the product that for me originally made me think of this company not as a joke, but as a really high quality brand that makes great products, because the Lawnmower 4.0 is a shaver. It is a trimmer for your private area, and it is purpose built for that with ceramic blades. In this economy, yes, ceramic blades, right? It has a 7,000 RPM motor. It's wet dry. You can use it in the shower. It has a travel lock, so it doesn't engage when it's in your travel bag. It's got an LED spotlight so you can see what's going on, make sure you get all the areas right. I think it's one of these things. The reason it's not silly is because we do this. We shave areas of our body and we use tools that are not purpose built for it. Old razors sitting in the shower forever. God forbid you're not doing it in the shower. Then cleanup is on you. Cleanup aisle you. This thing is for the shower. It is purpose built. Is absolutely extraordinary. And then you get all the other great stuff. They have the deodorants, the toners, the boxers, the Shed travel bag. It's all part of the Performance Package 4.0, and you can get it right now. Bring in the fall with 20% off and free shipping with code ArsenalVision at manscaped.com. That's 20% off with free shipping at manscaped.com. And use code ArsenalVision as the leaves fall. Make sure you have it all with Manscaped. Clive, is that enough of that?
Indeed.
Now, just the one today, which is nice. Nice break from the 17 we did, I think, on our last episode. So more Arsenal chat than brand-related chat today. Tim, I go back and forth on this. Boring games are a feature of City, and City win everything. And the people that aren't bored are the City fans. Everybody else is bored to tears, as you've said many times. We're a bit boring at the moment, or at least we were in the Everton game.
Mm-hmm.
But they created nothing. By the same token, I'm not sure that we were effectively boring. I think we were a little bit ineffectively boring, and there is a fine line between domination and sterile domination. At halftime, we had 3 shots and 0.1 expected goals to their 0.1 expected goals. We finished this game on 0.7 expected goals to their 0.3. Sometimes you have to nick a game. It's that simple. Teams are getting more compact. They're sitting deeper. They now know we're going to dominate the ball, so they are coming to defend. On the one hand, you can say we're patient, we probe, we keep the ball, we kept them away from our goal. And when the time came, we sped it up. One-touch football from a set piece, got our goal, and away we go. But I do think that if we are going to win a title, the way the attack has looked this season so far, is probably not the level we needed to be. Last season, we almost broke a club record for goals scored in a season. We were a dominant attacking force, but it was our defense that let us down. So I find myself torn because this dominance is what we need. We keep the ball away from our goal. We keep it near their goal, but it still feels to me like the attack hasn't clicked. How are you managing this? Because I know you're not a fan of City's football. It kind of puts you to sleep. How are you feeling about a game like this where we have 78% possession, but it still feels like maybe something isn't sparking in the final third the way it probably needs to?
Yeah, sure. I think there's like a macro and a what's the opposite of macro again?
Micro?
Micro. Yeah, going on here. I don't think you should feel torn because I think both things are true. I think definitely we are trying to maintain more control of games, and we saw it in this game, the not going long from centre and the keeping the ball and the selection and keeping the crowd quiet and all of that, because what happened in April, we went to Anfield, we went to West Ham. We actually got control of those games, and then we let them get crazy. We let the crowd get up. We gave them hope, and we've got much better at not doing that. The 2 away games this season, Palace and Everton, both quote unquote difficult places to go, where we've taken a bloody nose in the past. And I can't remember a chance we've given to either of those teams, or that either of those teams have had. So clearly there was a need to not have 3-3 draws anymore, or 2-2 draws. Like we need to, we need at the other end of the pitch, in particular, from a defensive standpoint, we need that. And I just thought the way we played at 1-0 was so instructive. The way we deliberately went back to the goalkeeper and just battered them from side to side. But nevertheless, you're completely right. And the manager has referenced this himself about, being more threatening in an attacking sense. He's brought Kai Havertz in, I think, for a bit of that as well, for increased kind of danger and all of that. So we're still tweaking that formula. And I think this is actually quite common when you've got a problem, and we did have a problem over control, and you tweak something, and usually what happens is you go a little bit too far at first because you're trying to solve a problem. And then what should happen is, you start to bring the levels down and equalize and everything. So I do think there's an extent to which it's a process, but also as an isolated game, I think this and Palace were very similar in that I always felt this game would finish, always. I kind of felt, particularly as the game was unfolding, this is going to finish 1-0. It's going to finish 1-0. It finished 1-0 last season. How did it finish 1-0 last season? We let them in, set piece, goal, 1-0. I thought if we'd gone 1-0 down in this game, I think it probably would have finished 1-0. But the way the game, I was calm during this game, which, I had 5 pints before the game, so it's not always easy to stay calm when you do that. But I was calm in this game
Pints
because I
of
was just
chamomile tea.
yes, yeah. It's done wonders for my digestive system.
Mm.
But like I was just like, just don't give them a stupid. And I felt the same with the Palace game. Just like, don't give away a stupid goal. Don't let them get something on a set piece. Don't let them get something on a breakaway. And we will win 1-0. Like I never thought this game was going to be 0-0. Put it that way. I was just like, we'll pick a way through. And Clive, I saw you tweet at halftime, 1-0 is fine in this game. And that is how I felt about this game. It was just like, this is going to be 1-0. And we need to make damn sure it's 1-0 to Arsenal. And so I do think there's a little bit of a micro thing where this game had its own particular temperature and we kind of knew how it was going to go and everything was tuned that way. And I think Palace was a bit similar because Selhurst, Goodison, quite similar challenges. They kind of pose to you. Palace are a much better team than Everton are, but the style of football Everton were going to play against us. I come back to one of Arsene Wenger's first quotes as manager. We played Sunderland at home and they went down to 9 men in the first half an hour. And they were literally like, they were kicking the ball into touch every time they got it. And it took Arsenal a while to break them down. They needed 2 goals in the last 10 minutes. And Wenger was asked about it after the game and he just said, you could put 9 monkeys behind the ball and it would be difficult to break down. And,
especially with them flinging their feces at you constantly.
Well, exactly. It put you off, that's for sure. But and that's what that sounds really derogatory about Everton. But do you know what I mean? Like, you don't need a lot of talent when you put 9 players behind the ball. If they're well organised and they can follow instructions, that's hard. So we just needed to make sure that when the goal came in this game, it came for Arsenal. I think more of the home games where it's a bit like we should be 3 goals up on Fulham before they get that chance from a corner. We shouldn't be like seeing out the Forest game like that. That's more where the dial is a little bit more sketchy than I'd like.
And to be fair, I mean, like the Fulham game is an example of how first goals just change dynamics in game. I think if the Martinelli goal stands, this might wind up a 3-0 or a 4-0, right? Because what happened after we got the goal? We opened up Everton a couple of times where it's pretty embarrassing that we did not score. There was the one breakaway. Was it Odegaard wound up taking his own shot? It's blocked. There's 3 Arsenal guys in the box, and it happens to fall to the one Everton guy. But he can slide in 3 different Arsenal players. Like, just a couple of those moments where we could have made it safe late. It is the case that the scoring the goal against teams like this becomes an important change in how the dynamic of the game goes. And we got it early enough, and then it was taken away from us, and we had to wait a while. Clive, I think it's first of all, let's praise some good stuff here. 16 since the start of last season. This is OptaStat. Since the start of last season, Arsenal have scored more goals from corners than any other team in the Premier League. 16. That is the part of the game. I always say the manager and the tactics can get you to the final third, but it's up to the players to score the goals. Well, set pieces are where you really see if the managers and the tactics, right, and the coaching can influence a game. It's another short corner routine. We speed up the play. We go one touch. It's brilliantly executed. It's a gorgeous goal. Clive, I think we have to stop and celebrate the Arsenal coaching staff for turning us into one of the most effective teams from corners, the most effective team from corners in the league. Those are extra goals that you don't get if you don't work on them,
Yeah, I think it's a major discussion point for us to have. We're going to have it more and more. I noticed the City games early in the season. Now they've got their 4 centre halves to the back. They've really focused on set pieces. They look really dangerous. But in the last 2 games, our sort of analysts have uncovered things that none of us are seeing. I mean, the Manchester United back post thing was like genius, right? And how they front load on when they defend that. And then this time I thought it was really, really smart because what do? Everyone knows that we've been watching that. So what do? We put people on the back post and then 8 of 11 corners go short. So, they think they're going to go to back post. Let's make sure we cover all our zones. We got everyone in the box. Great. What do? We just go short and then focus on the edge of the box because they collapse too much. They want you to play in there. Mate, this is high-level stuff. Really is high-level stuff. I mean, and I think the corner went wrong. I think Vieira has meant his first touch to come out of his feet a bit more. And then there's the left foot shot top corner. He's got that in his locker. We know it. But then what did he do? He got his touch too tight. So then he goes back into the area where we just come from, where we got numbers there. Pop, 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 goal. And it's like, it's beautiful, isn't it? I mean, it really is really nice stuff. We used to sit here.
What a finish.
Oh, what a finish. But we used to sit here.
Just opens his body, volleys it.
Yeah, we used to sit here and I used to utter these words. We don't look coached when I first started this with you guys. That's so not the case anymore. We look coached, we look prepared, we understand the weaknesses, and we want to impose ourselves on them and make sure, as Mikel Arteta says, make sure people can't see our weaknesses by controlling the story of the game. And it's really nice. I generally love this game, but I do like the way City play as well, the way they de-risk their game. And it can be a little bit, as Tim's got his hand on his jaw at the moment, it can be a little bit soul-destroying sometimes, because it can be. I do recognise that.
I'm fine if Arsenal do it.
But yeah, absolutely, mate. But when mate, Tim, I'm talking someone who's been to that part of the world many, many times and watched the crowd literally shout the result away from us. Every single collision, every single foul, there is no ground that influences the referee. I don't think as much as them. I honestly believe that. I've never seen them so quiet. That means we're working this out. We really are. We're working this out, and the set piece thing, I think, is another part of what we're trying to be, which is a really good, effective team. Elliot, you keep saying to me, well, maybe not just me, but the thousands of people listening, you keep saying to me, we haven't clicked yet. And I think in his mind, we have click being, if we can get back to our fast, cohesive, sprinting self that just looks fantastic in his 3-4-0. But we are clicking. We're one corner kick away from sitting here at maximum points. We've been in zero danger in any of these games. We've controlled these games to death. 2 sprinty breakaways for Forest and 1 dodgy corner and 1 dodgy pass for Fulham. And that's been it, and that's it. We've just completely sorted these teams out. And this is going to now start to lend into our next phase, because other teams can say, you know what, there's no point. Let's just sit off. And then players like, Vieira, Trossard are going to come into this game a little bit more in a slightly different way. And I do think the evolution of this team and the evolution of how other teams perceive us is going to be the next phase. Maybe after this international break, next one, we're going to see what we really look like, and we'll know more about the squad as well.
Yeah, I mean, so I'll answer the click comment just by saying this. I mean, first of all, at halftime of that game, 3 shots, 0.1 XG. I don't think anyone would say we had really found the incision from our dominance. To your point about dominance, against Forest, we had 78% possession. Against Palace, 53, but that was with 10 men. Prior to that, it had been about 70. 71% against Fulham. 74% against Everton. 55% against United. And by the way, most of that is because Onana just kept passing it to his defenders and back to Onana for half the game. So, I mean, yes, we are dominating. If you like field tilt as a stat, the field tilts are off the charts, which just means basically the amount of time spent in the attacking third versus our defensive third is a shorthand way of saying that wrong. But let's put it this way. Here's what I mean by click. XGA, expected goals allowed. And I know everybody loves expected goals unanimously, so I'm glad I'm bringing it up. We are second, very close to City, and then a gap to the group below. Expected goals for, the expected goals that we should have scored, we are 8th. Okay? I don't think any of us believe that if we finish the season 8th in expected goals, we'll be where we want to be. So I do think that our attack will have to provide more threat. I do think that. I think we will have to provide more threat. And I think the difference, though, is that I don't think it is a flaw in the system. I mean, if you really look at the change, we've played with Eddie Nketiah. We had a game we tried with Trossard. We played with Kai Havertz. He's a new addition, removing Xhaka. We've had a game we played with Fabio Vieira. We've We've lost Martinelli in the middle of a game and had to bring on Trossard out there. There's been a decent amount of change. And by the way, early in the season, we were playing Thomas Partey at right back instead of Ben White. And so that connection on the right with Saka, that changed. Ben White was brilliant in this game, by the way, a guy who never gets the praise he deserves. Saliba, by the way, also he had that one run with Beto where Beto was carrying the ball down the left half space and he just looked like he knew, I have no hope. I have absolutely no hope here. And eventually he just ran straight and Saliba overran him and let the ball roll out for touch. But Clive, it sounded like you want to come back on that because I think it's not playing well. It's not creating enough dangerous chances from the way we are playing. And again, to my point, it's just this simple. I don't think finishing 8th in expected goals for the season will have us sitting where we want to be. So we probably need to be a bit more threatening, would you say?
Yeah, and we will be when we need to be, right? And that's the key.
That'd be great.
That's the key. We will be when we need to be, because Elliot, we didn't lose anything last year on how many goals we scored. So if you look at the season,
no, but we had one of the most vibrant attacks in the league when we were at our best. I mean, we almost set a record.
When we're at our best, doesn't put any trophies on the sideboard, right? Where we lost out, and I'm a pragmatist, I am. Where we lost out is our goals conceded. So what's our XG against? It's right up there, right? It's right up there.
It's second, very close second to Manchester City.
It's right
4 expected goals allowed and 4 goals allowed, actually.
And that's the sustainable bit. That's the bit that's going to make sure we do something. That's the differentiator. Not chucking in 3 goals at home to Southampton, wherever it was, and things like that. That's the bit, mate, that we need to fix. Our ability to win second balls, Declan Rice's recovering skills are just standing out to me amazingly well. Our centre back's 1 year older. Ben White top, as you say. Zinchenko on the pitch. The introduction of Vieira, we're so unfortunate with Timber, but Vieira's not the kid he was, if you see what I mean. He'll be better this year. We need this. Tomiyasu healthy, playing well. This is what's going to make us win, not conceding. This is why Man City won the treble. It wasn't with their attacking plays, their ability to keep clean sheets. That, I know it sounds boring, but that's what's going to make the difference, mate. We will score when we need to if we have the right talent fit and available. That's my opinion anyway.
Yeah, no, that's fair. By the way, I mean, look, this is the problem with chasing Manchester City. You know what Manchester City are number 1 in every single season? Expected goals allowed. You know what else they're number 1 in every single season? Expected goals. They have the best defense and the best attack. That, my friends, is a very good strategy for winning titles. If you have both the best defense and the best attack, you have a good chance to win the league. I think, Tim, it's not surprising to me that our attack is taking maybe just a half step back this season, given that that's the part where the automatisms really matter. Clive made this point about the goalkeeper thing, right? Oh, you change the goalkeeper, the defenders won't know what to do. Come on. What do you mean they won't know what to do? They seem to know what to do just fine. But I think you change the attacking pieces, and there are relationships in that part of the pitch that can be a problem. And I think we've seen that a bit. One of the areas where we are currently playing with a backup player, and I'm going to just say that, and I know people are going to come for me, but I'm going to say it, is striker. We're playing with our backup striker. Eddie Nketiah has, I will raise my hand, impressed me in a way I did not expect to be impressed. There was a time when I did not really feel Eddie Nketiah was at the level for our club. He was 23, he was 24, he wasn't playing. Should he move? Should he move for playing time? And he has improved. Physically, he's improved. Technically, he's improved. His goal scoring return is pretty good. Eddie Nketiah has, I think, made me have to rethink my impression of him as a player. I think he is a good player to have at Arsenal. I do not think he is a player that we're going to build a title-winning campaign on, playing 30, 32, 36 games at striker for Arsenal. And maybe that's harsh, and maybe he will prove me wrong again. But we don't have to, because we have a guy in Gabriel Jesus, who I think is good enough to be that. And some people would even pick a bone of contention. Some people would disagree. There's another way you could say that with that statement. So what do you think, Tim? I mean, I watched this game, and I watched Eddie do some things I thought were good, but it still feels like we're playing a man short at times in that zone in terms of he's not a false 9. He's just a 9. And we want our 9 to do a lot of very complex combinations and things that I think he it's not that he's totally incapable of doing it. I mean, he wants to run in behind and score. He wants to turn his man and score, which is a great quality, but you can't always impose yourself in that way. So do you think that Jesus' return is a critical piece to that component, the attacking component, going up a level? I want to focus on the positive of Jesus coming back without it sounding like I'm being particularly negative about Eddie, but this was a game where I thought he maybe struggled to influence the game in the way he might have liked.
Yeah, I thought he was a bit 6 out of 10 again. I wanted him to start this game, and I think it was the right decision to start him and then bring on Gabriel Jesus afterwards, because everything you say is true, but at the same time, if we can't trust Eddie Nketiah to play games, to play important games, particularly when Gabriel Jesus is feeling his way back from surgery, then he shouldn't be here. That's kind of my contention about Emile Smith Rowe. And this isn't me criticising Emile Smith Rowe. It's just I don't understand why he's still at the club, because he's clearly not trusted to play really any part in any of these kind of games. And I think that we're leading to a situation where we're really struggling to sell him next summer and saying, why have we done this? Eddie is clearly, like at this point, is an important member of the squad, and we have to be able to do that. And I do think there is something in the fact that, like I said, I do think a part of starting Eddie was a bit about, letting, he's been playing well, let Jesus come back slowly. We've got other big games on the horizon. Like, I always thought, start Eddie in this game, give Jesus the next 2 games, then you start Eddie in the Carabao Cup. And that's like a satisfactory sharing of those games, really. And if you're Eddie, like, again, Emile Smith Rowe is just going to get the Carabao Cup and he's going to feel like, cheers. Whereas for Nketiah, he got Everton away and he's going to get Brentford away in the Carabao Cup. So, you're keeping him a little bit more involved. But I do also think there was a tactical component to it about that kind of short combination play and not scratching that itch to go long, which Jesus can give you, because he will fight for those aerial duels better than Nketiah will. I thought this was a much more about to feet kind of thing. But I do think if I was going to defend Nketiah's performance a bit, I do think the loss of Martinelli was probably significant, because then the balance of the attack, you bring Trossard on, that's another player that wants to come inside, wants to come to the ball. And it probably just upset the balance of the attack a little bit, because you look at the part Nketiah plays in the goal that's disallowed, like that's the stuff he's been doing really well this season, like kind of, that back to goal, showing feet, combination play and all of that. We didn't see enough of it in this game, and I'd have been curious to have seen how it had gone had we not lost Martinelli, or perhaps if Reece Nelson had come on for Martinelli and we'd kept that kind of formula. I do think if I was going to give him a little bit of a get out, it might be that like the kind of we went for one more kind of interior, wants the ball kind of like Trossard. I mean, he won us this game, and by the way, the finish for the goal is great. That's why you have 2 good feet, people. Like, compare that chance at the end. Fabio Vieira has one that's really well blocked, but Vieira should have done a Jesus. He should have cut in on his right and sat that player down, but he doesn't have enough conviction in his right foot to do it. Trossard gets it on his left foot, no problem. Back of the net, 1-0, thank you. That's why you have 2 good feet, particularly for an attacker. But that aside, that's maybe the get out I'd give Nketiah. But I'm not really fussed. We need to be able to trust Eddie in games like this. And I always felt, unless he scored a hat-trick and had a worldie, that Jesus will get the other 2 games. And I think that's what will happen. And then Eddie will get the Carabao Cup. Maybe he'll score a couple against Brentford and we'll be having the conversation again. But it's not about whether Nketiah is better than Jesus. He isn't. He's probably not going to be. It's can he get closer to that level so that we can trust him in games like this? And he wasn't bad in this game. He wasn't quite good enough, but he wasn't so bad that it made me think, oh my God, we can't play with this guy.
Yeah, fair enough. I think it's tough, right? Because if you're going to play with a low touch, low involvement striker, I think what they have to do is basically scare the living shit out of the defense, push them back, run them ragged, bounce them around. I mean, Erling Haaland is the perfect example. Manchester City took a while to adapt to Erling Haaland because he doesn't really connect, right? He's not a high touch player, but he gets 3 touches and he puts them in the back of the net. So the two things you got to be if you're going to be low touch is you've got to be ruthlessly efficient. You have to be clinical. The other thing I think you have to be is you have to be a focal point that draws attention and creates the space because 2 guys are following you and now the wingers have an opening. Eddie Nketiah, just from a stats standpoint, he completed 5 passes in the game, no key passes. He had 10 touches in 65 minutes. I think, like I said, if you're going to have that kind of game, I think you have to draw more focus and attention and maybe just pose a threat that creates openings for your teammates. So the other things can't have kid gloves, right? I've admitted now that I think Eddie Nketiah is good enough to be an important player for Arsenal. But if you're going to say someone's an important player for Arsenal, then you can't grade on a curve. You have to grade him as the start. He started at center forward for Arsenal. It's a very important position. And so you have to be, I think, critical in your assessment of the performance of the player. And so for me, when Gabriel Jesus came on, Clive, the game changed a bit. I really think it did. I just think you see in Gabriel Jesus a player who has an energy impact on the game and the way the players around him play. The good news is we have both of those players, and they're both going to be useful to us. But I think Jesus' return is going to be a big, big change from the start of games. And Eddie will, by the way, continue to influence games, starting them or coming off the bench. He's part of this squad now, and he's going to be an important part. But do you agree that Jesus coming on in these last 2 games, you see that level raiser in what he does for the group? Because that's how it jumps off the screen to me.
Yeah, it's not difficult to see, is it really? So yeah,
That's why I see it.
I think let's be honest. Jesus I think Arteta said we're building him up. Right? He's had his second knee up in under a year, and he's being built up. And Eddie's a big part of that. Right? So for me, I think he had a low involvement game. I've been consistent. I'm not worried about Eddie scoring. I just want him to be an impactful forward. Whether that be running the sides, whether that be pressing, whether that be defending, whether that coming back in and taking the ball from people. I just want to see his involvement. And I do feel sometimes when he's a little bit stressed about his performance, what he says is, I want to stand between centre backs and I want to score. And sometimes you can stand between centre backs and mark yourself out of the game. You've got to be braver to move, rotate, and get the ball to your feet. And he has done that on occasions. And he's changed games this season. Fulham was a good example. But I just felt in this game he didn't work hard enough. That was just my feeling. And he came off, and he's probably full of regret today. And the next game, I bet he works his socks off and comes back and does really, really well. There's no drama here. I think there is a discussion to have at centre forward. What type of centre forward do we need? Eddie's transforming into more of a facilitator. Is that natural to him? Because sometimes under stress you default to what you really, really are. And he's a box striker and he wants to get himself in the centre of the box and things will actually happen. Sometimes with Arsenal, that's the last thing we want. We want people to come out to create space for others to arrive into. It's not where you start, it's where you arrive. And we arrive with 2 from the right and 2 from the left. And we come out to in and we arrive into those spaces our centre forwards has left for us. So that's just one style. Other styles work as well on a certain day. So a tough day for him, but we've got a game in 2 days' time, right? No drama. Let's go again.
Yeah, I mean, look, we have a Yassine Trophy shortlisted goalkeeper, and we brought in another goalkeeper to push him this summer. We have Alexander Zinchenko, we thought was one of our players of the season last season, and we went and got this guy, and we got Ben White on the right, who we think is maybe the best right back in the league, and we got Urian Timber, who's a revelation. Unfortunately, he won't be impacting our season, but it is what it is. There's no suggestion that this manager or this club is ready to stand still and say something is good enough. I mean, I'm not sure they'll regard Jesus as good enough. I won't be surprised when we go for center forward in January next summer, because I think we will. That's not a knock on Jesus. Look at what the club is telling you. They're willing to push every position if they think they can do better. We were very strongly linked with Rafinha last summer. I don't think that was an accident. Look at the wingers we have. Okay, so I think there is a maniacal obsession with winning, thankfully, and there should be at every club, and not every club approaches it correctly. But I think we are correctly approaching it where if we feel we can upgrade at a position, we try to upgrade there. So that means, we usually use the expression on this podcast, you have to kill your darlings. It's not our expression, but we use it. And And I think that goes for any of these positions. And so I think it is fair to point to that position as one that we probably don't have a solution for yet. I mean, Jesus is certainly a player I rate very, very highly, and I think he's good enough to achieve our goals, but we need him back, and we need to see the influence he'll have. Tim, the reality is we had to win this game. We did win this game. We got rid of the Goodison Park hoodoo. It was an issue for us the last few seasons. We've seen ourselves have some very poor performances there. It can be a very difficult place to play, and we've come away with 3 points. It's huge. It lets us now focus on one of the bigger weeks the club has had in a long, long time. We have Champions League back, and we have the Derby. And I think it poses an interesting challenge and question for the manager, because you want to win your first Champions League game in 6 years? Do I have that right? I think I have that right. 6 years in front of the home fans, but you absolutely must win the Derby. How do you think about the return to Champions League, the prioritization of that game, and setting ourselves up for the Derby, especially now with an eye towards the fact that maybe we don't have Gabriel Martinelli, so that gives the manager even one more tricky consideration from a squad management standpoint?
Yeah, I don't think we have to prioritise them, really. They're both really important games. I don't think that means we have to go, treat one like a Carabao Cup game or anything. I just think a couple of changes for each game. Havertz might come back in for this one. Jesus will probably come back in, couple of changes. Don't know what will happen at goalkeeper. Maybe Tommy. Do you know what I mean? Like, I don't think we have to really wrestle with that. Coaches will always say the most important game's the next one. Clearly, there is a level of prioritization because we're not going to see the first team playing against Brentford next week. But I don't think we have to go mad about that. I think we can just look. I don't know enough about PSV, the kind of threats they pose, or anything like that. I don't think we have to worry too much about the North London derby yet. Play the team that's going to play against PSV. Listen, we know Spurs aren't in Europe this year. They don't have a midweek game. Maybe there's some consideration there. But then, I feel like when you're on the treadmill, keep going. And actually that is kind of helpful. I'm fine with that, and I'm fine with not really thinking about Tottenham until Thursday, personally.
Yeah, I mean that's right. It's tough, right? Because I gotta be honest. I was raised in the era of Arsene Wenger in the Champions League, where I was like, really, we're going to prioritize a Champions League group stage game? We always get out of the group. What are we worried about? But I realize it's not like that anymore. We haven't been there in a long time. We cannot afford to be lackadaisical in the way we approach it, right? We cannot afford that. But once upon a time, I remember we did take it for granted. Excuse me. So, I can't help that I'm thinking about the Derby. It's just sort of where I'm at in my head. Clive, the Champions League, though, is a big deal, and we are back in it. And I think this is something that we've wanted for so long. So getting off to a good start makes sense. How do you think the manager will kind of approach it the way Tim has sort of suggested, where you don't prioritize, where you play the strongest team available for PSV, and then you turn around and play the strongest team available for the Derby? I mean, a lot of big clubs do approach this competition that way. Do you expect that we'll do that?
I hope he picks the team like he did at the weekend, which is tactically suitable for the way he wants to play.
Okay.
The level of detail by which they're going into now is making me think I need to be studying the opposing teams a lot harder to try to understand what we're trying to achieve, because we're doing some really smart stuff here. Everyone's raising their game, right, on and off the pitch. And so obviously there are certain players we all feel comfortable with, particularly the back door of the pitch. Goalkeepers, we're now 50-50, aren't we? We're cool. We found a player there. Left 8, we're 50-50 there, aren't we? We found a player there, found a couple of players. So it's starting to evolve, isn't it? So centre forward, one had a bit of an average game. Maybe Jesus starts, comes off after an hour. That's him built up a little bit longer, a few more minutes. Eddie comes on into hopefully a better situation for him. He does the stuff. And then maybe Jesus starts at the weekend and plays a little bit longer, right? So it's all about that depth, mate. I just want to see us arrive in a competition and win at home, win your home games, and get one result away, and you're there, aren't you? You're qualified. So arrive in competition, make it economical as possible, because Spurs is a whole new ball game. all right? And that's when
Yeah.
everyone's on their toes, ready to go. And there'll be nothing left in the
Yeah.
tank that day, mate. Nothing.
We'll have a chance to talk about that game on Thursday and throughout the week, but on Thursday in particular. And I have some very strong opinions of that game myself. Clive, I'll stay with you just for a second. It hardly merits the conversation, but I will at least give you a chance to express your outrage about it because I know it's stuck in your craw. The narrative around time wasting and Arsenal time wasting, and the suggestion of 26 seconds. By the way, credit to Scott who always finds some data that I think is interesting. I think he said, and I might get it slightly wrong, so forgive me, I might be off by a second or two, but he said the average time taken on corners last season was like 33 seconds. We took 26 seconds to take our corner, and it's become a narrative. And like, it's absolute nonsense. The idea that Arsenal at 0-0 against Everton are time wasting. It's just the effort to come up with something like that strikes me as totally unnecessary. I know it's driving you nuts.
It does drive me nuts because you just did that on purpose, didn't you? You just drive me
I
nuts
did,
because the
wind you up and let you know.
well, the commentators they create narratives, particularly around Arsenal, because they know that we've got a vociferous online fan base, and we will respond, and that drives engagement. So really, you're picking us sort of unfairly in some respects. You may laugh at this, but last year Richard Keys was going on about Arteta on the sideline. Suddenly, the rules have changed, and one of the key reasons why the rules have changed on the sideline is because of Arteta. Hold on a minute here. We've got people running on the pitch, Jurgen Klopp, when the rules weren't changed then. But it's because of the furore around Arsenal. Again, the first manager to get booked, Arteta. Do you see what I mean? In the Charity Shield, this stuff does matter. The way Gary Neville commentates, he's looking for narratives and issues around Arsenal. He is. He tried it with Saliba in this game. He's done it with Saka in the past, and he's looking for these things. And what he's done this year cleverly, he said, "Well, I've picked Arsenal to win the league. So this allows me to have a little pop at them because I picked them to win the league. Do you see what I mean? Now I can now have a little dig." And so, and the time wasting,
Kind of like when I say, "Look, I really rate Eddie Nketiah, but."
Yeah, but he can't trap a bag of cement.
Kind of
You know what I mean? So it's like one of those things, right? So it's becoming transparent now. And I sent a tweet out about it, and I just thought it's a casual thing I sent out, but loads of people came back. So I mustn't be the only person thinking about this. He creates narratives on players and moments, particularly around our club. He has been brought up through most of his peak football years with Arsenal being the enemy. I totally understand it. I get it. We were the hated team, the team that was the closest one to them. He tries to be magnanimous about Arsenal, but deep down inside, he struggled with it. And mate, you know what? I understand it. I genuinely understand it. There are things you just can't get past. But he has such an influence that his words go beyond just a casual comment. They literally do change how referees referee us. They change how we're seen in the media. They create a state around our club, which we have to now manage, and it becomes a distraction. And I don't like it. Those words are not cheap to me. And so when people say turn it down, it doesn't matter if I turn it down. It's out there. Do you see what I mean? It's out there, and it's something serious. And I think I'd like to see the club respond to it. I really would. It really gets to me, it bothers me. We lost our left back at Palace. Then we drop points on a corner in the next game. This stuff bothers me. It does matter when we are the clean that are picked on to get players sent off, etc. and booked. So yeah, here we go. I'm over it now. Thanks, Eddie. You now wound me up my next.
I wanted to help you get it out of your system. Tim, do you want to get out of your system at all? I'll note, by the way, Saliba got elbowed in the face. Saka got cleaned out. The commentary on my feed was saying they were play acting. Saka
That's
didn't
what
even
the
get a foul.
referee thought as well.
Yeah,
that's what the referee thought, and
nonsense.
this is what Clive's talking about. I think there are two sides to this. I don't want to go into the Arsenal-y side of it because we all support our clubs and we all think everyone's out to get us, and I do agree with Clive, but I'm not going to come at it from that angle. My first
to your
angle,
point, Tim, just to say, like, there are United fans today that think that ball wasn't out
Yeah.
against
Yeah.
Brighton. So,
I
bias
mean,
is a thing. Yeah.
you can see how the game was refereed. The referee was just laughing, saying, "Get up."
Mhm.
Saka gets cleaned out. Everton get a drop ball. Like that, this stuff does have an impact, and we've seen this before. And listen, all football fans are sensitive about what broadcasters and everything say. We're too sensitive. But we've seen this before, and we've seen players leaving the fucking pitch in oxygen masks because of this permissive, and that did in part stem from the media as well. It just did. Okay, I don't think that's a conspiracy theory. I don't think that was the intention, but it happened. We all saw it happen. It created a permissive environment around challenges on Arsenal players. I'm not necessarily saying that exactly is what is happening here, but I'm just buttressing Clive's point about this stuff does have an impact. And just like I guess on like a more of a media / coverage. Look, Sky Sports charge a lot of money for subscriptions. They should not be shit posting. That is not what they should be doing. Like, I'm a customer because I kind of have to be to watch football
Mhm.
in the
Mhm.
UK. It's not a very open market to be able to watch football in the UK, so I have to have a Sky Sports subscription to see it. Like, they shouldn't be doing stuff that like clickbait and all of that stuff I can ignore from outlets that we can all name and we all know who they are. I can ignore that. I can't ignore Sky Sports because they've got me by the balls. They should not be shit posting, right? They should be above that, right? I'm not saying that they should go into massive like chin stroking or whatever. I know they've got an audience to serve. They should not be doing lowest common denominator stuff. When you're charging that money for subscriptions, you have a responsibility not to become a stupid teenage internet shit poster.
Mm. I mean, there's probably more money in the latter, but I take your point. It's well said. Yeah, they understand how to farm engagement, unfortunately, and that's driving a lot of content. That then ultimately drives back into how the game is run. Unfortunately, it's a feedback loop. I'll say it like this: it goes back to my thing about the offside goal. Common sense. If it's not common sense, then it's not the right rule. Why would Arsenal be time wasting at 0-0? It's not common sense. And you know what time wasting is? We get to use the pornography thing again. I know it when I see it. You know when a team is time wasting. It's not Tomiyasu taking those extra seconds over that throw. It's not 26 seconds before us taking a corner. Time wasting is persistent, repetitive efforts to reduce the amount of time available in a game to protect your position in the game. It is easy to spot when it's happening. You know how you notice it? Because the crowd's up in arms about it, right? The players are up in arms about it. So I just want you to understand that, like, this is common sense. And if there was more common sense in the way football was run, I think we just have a better outcome overall. We can leave it there. We don't need to get too much up our own asses. That's enough. We're just far enough to get a good whiff, and we can get out of here. We'll have a pod on Patreon tomorrow celebrating the return of the Champions League, talking about what it means and where we're going. Then we will have a lot of content focused on the derby, of course. Big week for the club. Big 3 points at Goodison. And whether you think we are clicking or not, we are dominating. So when we click, we might go bang, as Mikel likes to say. And I think the dominance is going to lead to good outcomes over time. Tim's on Twitter at Stominator. Thanks, Tim.
My pleasure as always.
Clive's on Twitter, Clive PFC. Thanks, Clive.
Thank you very much.
My name's Elliot Smith. You can block me on Twitter. And Gunner, we love you. And we will talk to you after Arsenal 10, PSV 0.